Welcome to the COP26 Nature Newsroom here in Glasgow. Today we have Peter Hall with us. Peter is on the UNFCCC team working on resilience, on the race to resilience. Peter, can you tell us what it means? What is the race to resilience?
Yeah, the race to resilience is a companion to the race to net zero. It was realized a couple years ago, and it's really taken fruition at this COP that we have to drive towards net zero, but at the same time we also have to increase resilience for people. So its goal is by 2030 to improve the resiliency of 4 billion people, and a lot of those people are in areas where they're the least responsible for the energy, but most impacted.
4 billion people.
Yes.
In Africa, Asia, Latin America.
Yeah, primarily in the vulnerable countries that right now are experiencing, significant impacts from heat, storm surge, sea level rise, and even in a 1.5 or 2 degree C world, we're still going to have 3.5 billion people will still face these climate shocks. So we're trying to basically elevate resilience as a companion, or the same side of the same coin, two sides of the same coin with net zero.
And so what are your expectations for the COP26 here in Glasgow in terms of building resilience for these 4 billion people?
Yeah, what the Race to Resilience has done, I think brilliantly, is looked at sort of 3 different areas that we can really drive action. So work in coastal areas, urban areas, cities, today's the cities day, and then rural. So looking at primarily like regenerative agriculture, smallholder farmers, who are really going to face a lot of the heat, drought issues, and trying to find ways that in addition to a net zero world, we can also, through businesses and large initiatives and coalitions, take action to improve the resiliency of people in those areas.
And how do you see the role of cities and regions to build resilience?
Yeah, so one of my other jobs at Wood is I run our partnership with the Resilient Cities Network. So they have a lot of cities in vulnerable areas that are part of this. So cities, in a lot of ways, can, one, become more resilient. So make the people that live in those cities, more adaptable, so they can, not just survive but thrive climate shocks. And then they're also, really tied into the value chain for a lot of the nature-based solutions. The other thing in cities right now is a lot of the solutions for climate change come about through nature-based solutions. I mean, nature can really buffer a lot of the cities from floods, from heat, from cooling. So that's a big part of the solution.
So could you give us some examples of some cities that are really leading as front runners in this race to resilience?
Yeah. So some cities now that are, one comes to mind. We're doing some work actually in Florida. Jacksonville, Florida, for example. Doing some really interesting work with river restoration. So actually rivers are one of the bigger issues. Here in Glasgow, you've got the river that cuts through the center of the city. A lot of cities have rivers that flood, and they're flooding more often, more frequently, causing a lot of issues for livelihoods. So what a lot of cities like that, Norfolk, Virginia, there's some cities in here in the U.S. In fact, the Clyde River has a really great example of the same thing, building out river systems. And then you work in parks, greenways, but at the same time, they can absorb floods. So you're kind of looking at flood mitigation. At the same time, you're improving access to parks, livability. So you're kind of combining air quality, livability, and flood resilience.
So building sponge cities, this is what's happening in Wuhan, in China as well, in many places around the world. And you spoke about nature-based solutions. Can you explain, for people who don't know the term, what it is and why it's so important to invest in nature-based solutions?
Yeah, for sure. So nature-based solutions, it's really at its core just using nature to both absorb floods and shocks. But also, as we're seeing, there's a strong overlap with the race to zero, because in a lot of cities, it provides cooling. It's also it's a sink. It's a carbon sink. So finding ways to, think about these problems and systems. So both energy reduction, but at the same time, resilience to future shocks is becoming just critical. The other thing in the race to zero that we're really trying to tackle is food supply. As heat, droughts, and they're only going to increase. I think I just saw if in a 2 degree C world, it's over 50% more areas will be exposed to heat. So what you grow, how you grow it, where you get your water, the whole system's thinking around the value chain, and we're trying to bring businesses to connect to their impact.
So COVID-19, do you think, had a lot of impact as well on these food systems? Do you see the emergence of local food systems where people also want to produce their food in the community gardens, or how is that changing?
Yeah, great question. COVID did a couple things. I think one, it just showed how collectively connected we are, right, to a shock. So it doesn't have to necessarily be a climate shock. It could be a health-related shock. So it drove systems, and then, like you just said, locally based food. I mean, we saw a lot of issues with supply chain, how you get your food, how it's transported. So I think it has caused a shift. In fact, I'm seeing more and more things like vertical farming in cities as a way to get locally sourced food production to cities. So we're seeing more of that, more innovation, more of an increase with digital getting involved in some of these solutions. So it's definitely increased the focus.
Do you think that we are on our way towards a nature-positive recovery now?
Yeah, it's tricky. I mean, this COP, it's the first time we've talked about resilience at a COP alongside net zero. So, I think the actions there, the messages there, and one of the things I'm going to do next year, staying on with the UNFCCC team, is now get projects. So once we can get projects focused in certain areas like farming, some of the nature-based green infrastructure projects, once we can get that in scale, the big challenge is to get more investment. So more local investment. And I do think one thing that's coming out, I think will be announced soon, is this thing called climate-related nature disclosures, TCNFD, which, like the GFAN's announcement here from Net Zero, that kind of announcement where your finance is basically putting a value on nature, and we're hoping that will drive more finance to nature-based solutions.
Valuing nature in decision making in companies, in government.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what are your expectations for COP26 here? Now we know that Boris Johnson came back. We have a lot of ministers and negotiators working around the clock. What can we hope for these last 2 days here in Glasgow?
I've been asked that question several times. I think there's a couple things. One, what I've heard is, and I've seen it, there's more private sector here than in any other COP. There's also more mayors here. A lot of cities. So I think it's a tipping point for action. I'm hoping that the understanding of the science that's a given, and what I'm hoping now is it will lead to more projects. And then the connection between finance and the firms doing the work. And the other, it's an expectation and a challenge that we'll do more work in Africa. We'll connect more to the global south.
Africa, and
exactly.
We are hearing that Egypt is going to host COP27.
Yes.
Do you see that as a positive sign?
Yeah, absolutely. So in talking with Nigel and the team, what we're hearing for the next COP, net zero for sure, but it's going to be focused on resilience, finance, and nature. So those are the key three themes. And so you look at where it is, where those countries are in the value chain of climate. It's going to have to include nature-based solutions. In fact, the race to resilience, we're measuring how it can impact people, so how people's lives can be improved, and also number of hectares preserved.
So the next COP in Africa with nature, finance, and resilience at the heart of it.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.